Welcome everybody. My name is Cho-Nan. I'm the CTO at Camino Financial. First of all, thank you for coming to this wonderful event. I've been coming here for the last, 5-6 years. And I'm really surprised at the turnout today. I was initially thinking there was nobody going to be coming to my talk because I remember going to Hong Kong in 2003 when there was SARS, and literally there is more people here than the empty streets of Hong Kong. So thank you. So let's get started. Before I jump into the topic of crafting a life-changing tech internship experience, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. So I'm the CTO at Camino Financial. I have about 20 years of industry experience. My verticals obviously been in Fintech, but also I've been exposed to digital media and influencer marketing. Earlier in my career, I've been very focused on working at Fortune 500 companies. More recently, last 7 or 8 years, I've been working at startups here in LA and also in Beijing. The company where I work is called Camino Financial. Camino Financial is a data-driven Fintech platform that pioneer offering business loans to the Latinx market. So that's kind of the background, and let's jump right in. So I want to ask everybody, think about it for a moment. What's the one moment in your life that had the biggest impact, on your career? And this is obviously different for everybody, right? For instance, if you were a celebrity singer, maybe it was this audition experience that you had, when you were in grad school, right? Maybe for actors and actresses, maybe these up close and personal, thing they had when they were a kid with this particular actor or actresses. As for me, I think I would be, lying if I was to say, I've always wanted to be a CTO, and because of all this one experience that I had in the past. But I did have a really, really pivotal experience in my life, and that was this internship that I had in the summer of 1999. It was a tech internship in Tokyo, Japan. And a little bit more context, I met the CEO of this Japanese company actually in New York where I was going to school. But he was very kind, and he asked me if I was interested in the internship, and I right away, signed up for it. So, there I was in 1999, at 20 years old, showed up in Tokyo, and I had this, 3 months of, fun and learning and all kinds of stuff. And I will show you a couple of pictures of my experience there. But first of all, let's talk about the company. The company is called Digital Garage. The company actually still exists today. They are listed on the public stock exchange in Japan. And back in the days, I think they were the first ISPs in Japan, and they've had a lot of different e-commerce / online business underneath the company. So I was very fortunate to work on a few of these projects, and this was, back in the days, this was almost pre-Google days, so there was InfoSeek and Yahoo and all kinds of wonderful search engine technology. So one of them was InfoSeek, and it was a localized version of that, and I worked on it. And I worked on WebNation, which was an e-commerce shopping site. And then I also worked on another project called SonicNet Japan, which was a online magazine for rock music. So they were a wonderful project. And the two gentlemen that you see are, the co-founders of the company. On the left, that's the CEO, Hayashi-san, who I met in New York, and was kind enough to extend an invitation to his office to be an intern. And to the right his name is Joi Ito, was formerly a MIT media director at the Media Lab. who recently stepped down last year due to a scandal, but he's still with the company. And these were, my coworkers back in the days, and this was Tokyo. And on the left, that was the creative team who I spent a lot of time with. And this was back, this was back in the day when there was no CSS or JavaScript. So if you want your website to look beautiful, you need to mark up your images. And the creative team was doing that. Look how young I was. I was like, my coworkers, were showing me streets of Tokyo, and there, the CEO again making funny faces. But it was a really fun environment, a mix of local Japanese engineers and also engineers from America. And I got to party a lot, I have to say. I went to a festival called the Fuji Rock Festival, and these was, I was doing a live coverage of the event there, so I had the backstage pass, and I managed to, meet some of these artists, like Rage Against the Machine, Limp Bizkit. I mean, these were all, classic rock bands in the 90s and whatnot, and it was pretty cool back then. So, and I was out there for 4 days, 3 nights, just doing a lot of tech support on the spot. That was cool, and I also got to travel a lot in Japan, went to Kyushu and saw the ocean and met wonderful Japanese families, more partying, and hanging out with teenagers, and cosplayers on the streets of Tokyo. So very, 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 very fun. But it's not all fun and no work. So I did spend a lot of time, learn. This was my first exposure to open source technology at that internship. I learned Python, I learned Perl, Zope, which was a web application framework, VI Bash and PostgreSQL. And a lot of these technology, actually, I would say all of them are still around today, which goes to show the strength of open source technology. So why am I saying all this, right? So in hindsight, I was very, very, moved by the experience. I learned so much and had so much fun. And along the way in my career, there were always moments that I thought about that particular experience, and that always had some kind of impact and influence on my decision in my career. And so I always thought, okay, maybe there is some way, maybe I can offer it someday, and that opportunity presented itself 3 or 4 years ago when I joined Camino Financial. So back in the day when I first joined, I was employee number 4 or 5. We were very small, and today the company is about 70 people with 2 offices, one here and one in Mexico City. We're a lot bigger now, but back in the day we were bootstrapping. We didn't have a lot of resources, we didn't have engineering. I was the first engineering hire. So obviously I was very busy coding during the day, working alongside the CEO and a few other people, founders of the company. But in the evenings, right, I would end up at a lot of the startups here, actually meetups in Los Angeles. I would just go and try to meet people, learn new things. And I remember one particular incident. Sometimes you go to meetups, and then you happen to see the same guy over and over again. So there was this guy, his name was Peter, and so I saw him a few times, and then finally I decided to, introduce myself and strike up a conversation. And say, hi, I see you a lot of time, and what do you do? And then Peter told me, so actually I'm an Uber driver. I drive Uber all during the day, but at night, I take Coursera classes. I do a lot of coding, and he was trying to show me his project, and that was really cool, right? But the very same week that I met Peter, I was hanging out with some of my friends who I think was the CTO at one of these startups on the west side, a very well-funded, startup in LA, tech companies. And we were just having lunch, and my friend was telling me, hey, Cho, I just lost another engineer last week, and it's so hard to replace. I'm gonna have to spend a lot of time, trying to get a new hire in place. So it dawned on me right at that moment, like, hey, look, we have this really great ecosystem, in LA. Got a lot of young people, very hungry, wants to learn, right? And then we've got a ton of well-funded tech companies, but there is no bridge to help people that wants to work to end up in some of these companies. So I decided maybe, I guess I, as the CTO of the company, could do something about it, So what I did was I started, designing this internship program. And just to make sure that we're on the same page, the internship program that I've designed is, not so much the 3-month summer internship programs that you guys see a lot that typically tech companies do. The one that I've designed is more for people, they're currently doing something else, not in software, but they want a career switch, but they don't have a way of doing that. So I kind of, sat down and thought about that, and the first thing I was doing was, what would be the ideal profile, right, of our interns? And in the beginning, I was very stubborn about some of these requirements. I was thinking, hey, the intern has to have, this kind of background, computer science, what kind of exposure and all that stuff. But at the end, the lessons learned was that, hey, I want to look for a good problem solver. It doesn't matter if he has this many tech experience. In fact, if they have too much tech experience, they probably are good enough for full-time somewhere else already, right? So, but too little isn't good either. So there has to be some kind of balance. I remember this one particular conversation that I had with one of my initial intern hires. He showed up at our company, and we had this interview. So tell me about yourself, your experience. And then he was saying, oh, I worked at McDonald's and a couple of fast food restaurants. And then when I heard that, my heart sank. I was like, this couldn't possibly be a good fit, right? Then he went on to say, in fact, these restaurants are owned by my parents, and in my spare time in between shifts, I would be doing some coding, and I wrote some code to help manage the timesheets and people, and then that's when my ears perked up and stood up, and that really piqued my interest. And he said, can I show you the code? And I reviewed the code, and it was really, really good. Of course, it was missing a few things here and there for production quality, but the gist and the potential were obvious to me. So going to, with that lessons learned, I became very flexible about the type of people coming in, and not so stubborn about some of these things. So no experience is okay, no CS background is okay, right? And no bad credit is okay. So, so these are, but in order to filter, these people, I have to come up with some ways so that it's efficient for me, right? So recruiting, how do we find them? So a lot of times, I often think of myself as Professor X. I have this telekinetic ability. When I see somebody, maybe I get a sense of that person's skill set. Just kidding. But there is obviously there has to be some kind of methods in place so that this is scalable, right? You can't have, you're growing a team. So of course, like we would post our internship ads on Indeed and whatnot, all kinds of recruiting forums. But then we will have take-home tests. We have phone screenings. We have online tests people can take, so that I can really filter down, the funnel, and try to get to the intern that probably would be the best fit for the company in the most efficient ways. And after filtering them, we have the interns meet everybody in the company, and then we kind of do this American Idol style voting just to see, just get a sense of fit and if they should be joining the internship program. So what exactly do they do in the internship program, you may ask? So a lot of things. They're often kept very busy. There is three major components to it. There's a theory piece, right? And then there's a practical piece, and then there's a final presentation at the end of internship. The theory piece is all about, doing their readings at home. I give them reading assignments, usually books, that's great for computer science, software career. One of my favorite books is Pragmatic Programmer, so that's usually the first reading assignment, and then I give them midterms. Usually I will have them pick out certain, core pillars of computer science and have them study that for a period of time, and then give them midterms. So it could be database, could be operating systems, right? People that are just missing in some of these fundamentals, and then trying to get them really good at it. Then we have the practical piece, which basically I assign them work, which are similar to what our typical full-time engineer would do in the office. They have to, participate in our sprints, and they get assigned tasks. But obviously in the beginning they would get the easier ones, right? But at the end, they will get to do the hard stuff. So that's the practical piece. And then at the end of the internship, which could be usually 6 months to a year long, they would do this final presentation and talk to the whole company about what they've achieved here. Usually they pick a topic of their interest. Maybe it's something they've done, maybe it's something they was really curious about, and they spent like a good month just writing up some code, right? Putting together a demo and presentation, and they would do the presentation, and then they would just present to the whole company. And then aside from all that, I do stuff like getting them out to conferences like this, come and learn from peers. They are in software, and so last year we actually came to Scale as a team, and that was actually a lot of fun. And then sometimes we go to the AWS training events. And then the other thing that we kind of do a lot as well is to visit other tech companies in LA. Some of my friends that are CTO somewhere else, and we just have like an open house for an afternoon, and we just go and chat and learn from each other. So that's kind of the gist of the internship program. But the meat of the internship program actually is the mentorship itself. This is something that I do with everybody that comes through. Usually I spend maybe an hour, half an hour, every 2 weeks, just kind of, talk about my, stories and battle scars, right, and things that I've seen. And usually it's like, production deployment failure, or faulty logic in implementation, or corrupted databases, all these battle scars, right? And I try to share my wisdom as much as I could with these interns so that they could learn from it. And it's been a lot of fun, and I think a lot of the mentees that came through in the internship, like, they just learn all these, wonderful, lessons. And then the next thing is to think about when you're running these sort of internship program is what sort of challenges, right, can you expect from running such an internship program. So there's a few things to think about. Sometimes is, people could get started, right, and then they might quit halfway, and that's usually I would say the biggest challenge, because it's a very rigorous program. People, they get hit in all directions. Typically in our startup environment, there's often a lot of work, and obviously they also have to catch up on some of these other assignments that I give them, reading assignments or take home, whatnot, or midterms they got to prepare. And And obviously, it's a paid internship, so it's good for some of them, but sometimes things happen and they just don't have enough money. So money, another thing, it could be a factor for some of these people to think about, like, whether they want to stay on for this long, right? Or they just need to go out and find a real job that pays. And then pressure. Obviously, there's a ton of pressure within the company to deliver, because in the beginning, especially with such a small team, everybody gets to see. Duration of the internship is also vital. You could, sometimes people just are not sure, if they can commit something like 6 months to a year, right, for a career switch. So if you make your internship too long, people, they just like, all right, I've learned enough, maybe I go somewhere else after this, or what have you. There's a lot of different complications behind it. Too short, they might not have enough background or foundation to really do well in the job. But I always tell them, in many ways, this is a lot better than a boot camp, because the boot camp setups in LA, or typically in different places, are more on the theory side. They don't really always get to apply what they've learned in a real environment or setting. So that's why I tell people, you just gotta get through it. And then of course the time commitment. This is another thing. Sometimes people have trouble just committing that much time, and then with all that pressure, they could give up halfway, right? And then at the end, it's a waste of time for everybody. And then recruiting is one of those things that could take up a lot of time. So initially, with us at Camino Financial, I was doing all the recruiting myself, so it was taking up a lot of time. Now we're better. Now we have an HR person, and so I have help. But this was one of those things that took a ton of time. But at the end of the day, though, I think the philosophy really works. Like, given if you get these things, challenges, in a place where it's good fit for your company, the people that are in it, like the interns that are in the program, they do go through a very interesting time in their life, because they will obviously have fun, right, with their peers, but they will also get these pressures, and sort of the philosophy behind the program is, you give them this pressure and then this real world challenges, and that will show and reveal the true potential from the experience. So that's pretty much, the kind of the idea behind it. I want to show you some highlights from the program. Another a slideshow. those are the highlights from the program, and I've been running it for the last I would say 3 years or so, with some success. I would say 90% of my engineering team have full-time staff that are picked from the internship program. So, and one of the most interesting things is, at these every time when somebody finishes graduates from the internship program, I usually have a concluding session with the interns, and I remember this particular one that was very interesting. The intern came in, and then we sat down, and I asked him, "So what have you learned from the internship program?" And then he started going like, "Oh, I learned algorithm, data structures, how to code, and and stuff like that." And I interrupted him. No. I mean, what have you really learned, from the internship program? So he paused, thought about it for a long time, and then he said, people have issues, projects can get hard. Personally, I've got a ton of things going on myself, but I'm glad I did it. I learned so much, about life, and for me, that was a very, a grateful moment for myself, and I feel a great sense of just accomplishment, and so, it just goes to show and confirms that there are talents here in LA, and you just need to make sure you develop them, and you need to spend the time, commit the time to make sure that it goes through the rigors of effective and comprehensive internship program. That's the end of my talk. Open to questions if you have. Yes.
Sure. I'm very much beginner with it, and I've been taking tutorials online about JavaScript, and I'm wondering if you could talk to us about a little bit about the languages that are used for coding right now, because I don't want to be chasing the wrong rabbit.
Sure. So the question is, the gentleman at the back is learning JavaScript, and he wants to know about different languages that's out there, right?
Yeah.
So there are so many languages. There's always paradigms and trends, but JavaScript is a popular programming language to learn. I think it's very suitable in the sense that it could be applicable for front-end development. It could also be applied towards back-end development. The language of our company is Python. We do a lot of Python programming. That's kind of my language. And then the reason I picked it is because it's easy to pick up. Even for somebody like you, if you have never been exposed to programming, that is one programming language that's that's beautifully designed and easy to learn. There are obviously other programming languages like, Go or C++. I mean, the list just kind of goes on. And each of them have their own pros and cons. It really kind of depends on, what's the goal, right, for your learning. Are you just kind of casually learning about a particular programming language to just get your hands dirty?
As you can see, I have physical mobility issues.
Sure.
And I need to bring my income up more. And to be honest with you here, I need to be in touch with more people than I do right now.
Absolutely. And I think there are some really good startups around Pasadena. Meetups around Pasadena that maybe I think some of them, they do introductions to certain programming languages. I think those would be good to check out as well.
I'm visiting down here. I live in near the Reserve Force Base up north.
Oh wow, okay.
I'm in the other desert.
Right. Yeah. So if you want to, maybe we can exchange contact. There are some online forums that I'm happy to introduce to you, and then you can maybe connect with more people over there. Yeah. Yes.
So obviously having some tech skills is important.
Yep.
But the other half that we don't teach in college a lot of times are the soft skills.
Correct.
So what kinds of things would you want to see from my students in terms of soft skills?
I think in terms of soft skills, that's what I realized over the years. Sometimes good engineers, they're not exactly sociable.
Yeah.
So most interns that come through, they have, sometimes, it takes a bit more effort to get through to them. But I think what's important is to foster a culture of communication, with the interns and help them develop some of these soft skills. I think, in our company, we've done stuff like brown bag lunches, and in a nutshell, that's like getting people up on stage, usually on a Friday afternoon, over lunch, and they pick a topic of their interest, and they talk about it for like 20 minutes, and they interact with the crowd. So that's one of the things that we do to help kind of develop, their soft skills, and obviously putting them in a team situation. That is another way of developing, because you cannot work in a team if you don't communicate, and then there are obviously like nuances, and that's about how to go about getting these skills, and I would cover them usually in my mentorship session, maybe like just elaborating a little bit on, what's the best way to approach certain topic, like should it be a wide open discussion with everybody on Slack, right, or should it be a real meeting with a couple people, and then maybe even explaining the dynamics, of, say, in a meeting when there's an executive in a room, like how do you say or certain things so it doesn't cause problems down the road. So these are like the different ways that we do to help cultivate that soft skill. And in our company, I feel like as we do these programs over the years, like communication skills has been one of the key criteria in our hiring and recruiting process. So now more often than not, if somebody have trouble, that comes through an interview and have trouble sort of explaining themselves, I'm working in the business environment, so I need to make sure whatever we do, right, also makes sense for the business. So we need to definitely, have some kind of, filtering and selection criteria in place, so to ensure success of the program, basically. Yeah. Yes.
First of all, I really like the presentation.
Thank you very much.
And I wanted to ask you about what are some challenges that you face in your mentoring?
Sure. I have had a couple of different challenges in the past. Usually is not, I would say, sometimes it's the frustration, which I have to manage, right? Because usually in a startup environment, we're going 200 miles per hour, with this fast-moving train. And then all of a sudden, like, you onboard this intern who may or may not be experienced, or maybe maybe the person's experience is very, spread. So it's very hard to right away, apply somebody's skills to our, to our office, to our company, or our business problem. So I need to manage their expectation, because most of these interns come in, they want to prove themselves, they want to do so much, right? And I'm happy to let them do it, but I gotta feed them sort of piecemeal fashion. You kind of start here, and then you kind of, progress towards something that's harder or more challenging. And then at the end, when they could take on a challenge without me holding their hands, that's when I can step back and just enjoy the fruit of the labor. So managing that expectation and that frustration on both sides, I think that's usually a big challenge, because people, some people that come in and say, I got the skill set. I used to do this for my, family business. But then if you look closer, that code is missing unit tests. That code, is not production grade. And then they have to understand, how to do Git properly in a team environment, and they have to go through pull requests, which a lot of times when interns coming in, they don't have that kind of prior experience unless they've worked in, bigger companies or, or some kind of team setting. So making sure that that person can be ramped up is a lot of work, and we have to do it obviously efficiently. Now it's a lot better because we have a much bigger team now, and so I have people, that helps me, right, to get some of these people onboarded, and then I just focus on the mentoring. So stuff like that, that helps. Other than that, it's just kind of like, making sure that, the interns just kind of, sometimes I got to put myself in the intern shoes and make sure that they don't quit halfway. That's a thing that I typically don't like, because, what I'm doing is a very tailored program. It's completely personalized. I come in, I work with somebody, and I look at how they're doing, right, and then I assign the midterms, depending on their interests and skill set. And the timing is also flexible, right? So I try to work with them as much as I could. But there would be times when people just can't take it, and just sort of like pacing, that's something that's very important. The hardest thing is sometimes I have to let people go too, like people just don't, don't ramp up, but as a business, I will have to do that. But maybe next time, if I were to do this in a non-profit setting, maybe it's different. Like I could do a lot more in terms of hand-holding and ramping up. So these are the challenges, basically, I gotta figure out. Yes?
What recommendations would you give to somebody who's just entering the field with very little experience? Do you recommend learning how to code online, through the boot camps, or going to the meetups?
Yeah. So there are many ways to approach it. There's no one quick or fast way. I think at the end of the day, building up your confidence is actually very important. There's things you can learn online, and of course, when you get into one of these internship programs, the company will train you too. There are programs everywhere, but sort of building up the confidence, getting some of your basics so that you could getting your basics right, so that you could present yourself, when you're having these interviews with the company, because that's the fastest way to learn. You could sit at home all day and just do your own thing and learn yourself through online courses. That's fine, but at some point, you're going to hit ceiling very fast because you're not getting feedback, right? Very few online programs have feedback. The kind of feedback we do is as you can see from the program highlight, you sit together with a full-time intern. They're telling you, oh, this should be done better, and then we do pull request reviews, just like in open source community, but we do it within the company setting. People are critiquing your source code line by line almost, that's where you learn the fastest because you're gonna get feedback and you feel a little bit pressure. And this happens all the time. Like usually my interns come in, the first pull request, I tear that code apart because it's just like this, all these crappy conventions gotta go, or this is bad logic, this is gonna get into memory issues. That's not something you can learn online or by yourself. It's harder. So if you have the basic skills, then you can try to be comfortable with applying to some of these internships, and even the act of applying, right, is very helpful because you go through these testing, interview stages, you get to do all these online things. But the most important thing is when you go and meet their hiring manager, right, you're gonna say, hey, this is the amount of time that I've spent, studying this. I'm new, but I've, invested time. This is my code, right? This is the project I've done. If you could show all that, basically people see that you have potential, right? And then that's kind of like, how you can get your foot into the door. So just to kind of summarize, right? Simple project, demo, website, GitHub, repo of your work, and then of course doing some of the online courses to at least know the basics, right? And then with that, keep trying to apply for internships. Another way of doing it is also go to coding boot camps. They also sometimes help you out, but the challenge is you got to pay for coding boot camp. But internship, like ours, is a paid program, so you do get money. And of course, it's not a ton of money, but you do get paid. You can afford a place to live and things to eat. But that's kind of your stepping stone, and then from there you get into the industry. Yeah. Yes.
Kind of building on that question a little bit.
Yep.
I'm also a student, and I'm pretty much learning every language that I can get my hands on a little bit, learning most of the fundamentals and stuff like that.
Yep.
Would you say that's better to do as you're starting off, or would it be better to maybe take one language and run with it and try to be like a master of one versus a jack of all kinds,
Yeah, I definitely recommend picking one to go into, just because at the end of the day, I think, depending on the company, some companies, they like sort of an all-rounder, but the thing is, most companies, there's always a primary language they use, right? Very few, unless you're like Microsoft or Facebook, and they have like all kinds of languages because they're so big. But if you're talking about these, LA companies that are like sort of mid or small size, they can't afford to have a tech stack that is split in like 5 different languages. But if you're good in one particular language, right? For instance, like, Node.js is a very popular one for LA, or generally in the tech ecosystem around the world. So if you're really good at that, obviously your chance of finding a job or internship is a lot higher because people will pick that. But on the other side of things, some other companies, like, they're language agnostic too when it comes to hiring. They just want to know that you can code and figure out logic. So even if your experience was in another language, then it's they're just going to assume that learning is transferable to the new thing. So if I were a hiring manager and I look at a resume, you've got 10 languages, and your experience are like just coding boot camp or no experience, then for me, it doesn't look very enticing because it means you've dabbled on in a lot of different things, but you're not very focused in one. But say if you say you're very good in Java, for instance, and then you got a repo full of Java projects, and you religiously commit your code, almost every week, that says something about you. That says that you are somebody who is very good in Java, right, and very hands-on, and I think that goes a lot further, because what's going to happen is if you write so many things on your resume or CV, you go into an interview session, they're going to start asking you questions about these languages, and every language is so complex. There's all these little things. There's no way you can pick up everything. Not even me. I have 20 years experience, and I can only say, okay, I'm probably most, fluent in Python. But like a lot of stuff like Java that I've done before, but because I don't use it that much anymore now, there's all these new versions coming out, and it's got new features. I have no clue. So it's important to keep yourself up to date, with one, maybe two. If you want to do one front and one back end, then maybe two. But that is something I would recommend. And then alongside of that, usually you should be handy with Git or some kind of repository tool, because it's now sort of the minimum requirement. Like not knowing how to do version control is it's not good in the field. Yeah. Anybody? Yes.
Outside of internships, have you ever done anything like company tours where you brought in students and just to kind of show them what the company's about, what it's like, what you're looking for, just to give them some expectations?
Yeah.
So when they are ready for an internship?
So I have not done that, but I've done the reverse, which is I've gone to schools. I've gone to Caltech. I've been there already a few times this year, and I participate on in their career fairs, and I would take my interns with me, and I have them like explain the program and what we're looking for, and also tell them a bit about the company. So that's been very effective. I like the idea that you brought up, bringing students in. Maybe this year that's something I'll try, just to see if I can get a group going. I would love to bring in even high school students, college students, just to get them acquainted with our program. We've had a lot of success too last year with our summer program. These kids they just like came in, even though it's 3 months. They learn really fast, and in fact some of the code they wrote today still sits in production and making money for the company. But one thing I need to clarify is, I think for summer internships, we're more particular about the person's experience, their academic background. Like usually I would look for people with CS background, but the sort of the year-long program, the career switching program, then I'm more open to, whatever background, as long as you kind of show some potential. So that's kind of my experience so far.
I just had a student who took a company tour of ZipRecruiter, and
Yeah.
he was just flabbergasted about how much he learned just by taking a tour.
Yeah, usually it's a fun. So I don't know if you recall, during the slideshow, we've sent interns to other tech companies, and usually these are bigger tech companies like Google, Verizon, and they usually see a lot more. And I like doing that because it kind of gives them sort of a guiding vision on where we want to be, when we're bigger. So now I guess in some ways we're a little bit bigger now. We could start having people over and just see how we're set up and all that. Anybody else? All right, I guess that's it.